Have you ever wondered why so many Washington, D.C. residents are seriously considering moving to Palm Springs? Not just for vacation, but for real life? I'm Glen Nadeau, and in this video, I'm going to break down the real cost differences, what daily life actually feels like, how the community here compares to big city life, and if Palm Springs could be your smartest relocation move yet, especially if you're thinking about buying a home, building equity, or planning your next chapter. If you have questions, drop them in the comments below. Let's dive in. If you're living in Washington, D.C. right now and you've ever caught yourself wondering what life might actually feel like somewhere completely different, somewhere sunnier, slower, and surprisingly strategic, you're not alone. Let's explore direct comparisons between Washington, D.C. and Palm Springs so you can better understand what truly changes if you relocate, what stays the same, and what most people don't realize until they've lived it. We're not just talking about weather and scenery, although Palm Springs happens to have more than 300 days of sunshine a year. We're talking about pace of life, cost differences, housing realities, community and social connection, long-term living, and what life could actually feel like if you decided to make the move. So if the quiet pull towards the desert has been creeping into your thoughts, stick with me, because this is the context you deserve before making a life decision like this. When people in Washington start considering Palm Springs, it seldom begins with a dramatic dash out the door. It usually starts with a quiet curiosity, a flicker of thought on a tough day, scrolling through Instagram photos of sunny patios, or a moment when a sky full of gray feels heavier than usual. And that's because life in Washington is powerful, historic, and deeply rich in culture, but it can also be expensive, crowded, and a little relentless. Washington, D.C. is one of the most expensive cities in the U.S., and that shows up in housing and rent. On average, the cost of living in Washington is about 12% higher than Palm Springs for a comparable lifestyle and housing alone. Whether renting or buying is specifically more expensive than the desert. For example, rents in D.C. are roughly 50% higher than in Palm Springs, and the average listing price for homes in Washington is about 22 to 23% higher than in Palm Springs. That means that at a basic level, your dollar doesn't stretch as far in Washington as it does here, and that reality creates everyday pressure in your budget, your monthly planning, and your long-term financial thinking. But it's not only about money. It's about how life feels when you're living it. People in Washington often talk about fatigue, not just physical tiredness, but the kind that comes from a persistent operational pace. Daily life can feel structured around commutes, crowded transit, and seasonal weather swings that bring hot, humid summers and cold, gray winters with real intensity. And that's precisely what drives the quiet curiosity that starts with a simple thought. Could life feel less like a sprint and more like a thoughtful pace? When you think about pace of life, it helps to look at the small moments, the things that make up your day. In DC, mornings might start early and hectic, focused on getting to work or onto the metro, and end with traffic, delayed transit, or the stress of finding parking. Weekends can feel busy, but that busyness isn't always restful. Sometimes it's just a different kind of mental overload. In Palm Springs, people experience daily life in a noticeably different rhythm. There's less friction in daily logistics, shorter drives, lighter traffic, and a sense that the environment is cooperating with you rather than competing for your attention. Instead of navigating crowd density, your mornings might start with a walk to Townie Bagels, coffee on the patio with the hummingbirds, or a dip in the pool. And for many people who move here, that shift from production-driven stress to presence-driven ease is one of the most profound changes they notice within the first few weeks of relocating. Palm Springs' slower pace doesn't mean empty or lifeless. Far from it. It just means that life is calibrated differently. A regular day here might include errands without the rush hour anxiety, outdoor time built into routines, and social moments that don't feel like battles against time or logistics. When people imagine Palm Springs, they often picture endless sunshine, and the reality is even better than the stereotype. Palm Springs has a hot desert climate with warm winter days, long sunny springs and falls, and predictable heat in the summer. With more than 300 days of sun each year, most people here schedule life around comfort and rhythm, not surprise weather swings. But let's be honest about summers. It gets hot. Daytime temperatures can regularly climb above 100 degrees, and overnight lows often stay warm too. That's part of the desert living. But unlike humidity-driven heat in Washington, Palm Springs' dry heat is often much more predictable, manageable, and easy to adapt to once you learn seasonal rhythms. In fact, I've personally found that 80 degrees on a humid day in DC is less tolerable than a 110-degree day here in Palm Springs. Pools, shaded patios, early mornings, and intentional outdoor planning become part of your life that feels ordered rather than oppressive. Another climate factor that people don't always think about is how weather impacts your emotional environment. People in Palm Springs often talk about how light and sunshine makes daily routines feel easier, more fulfilling, and more intentional, not just warmer. One of the biggest differences people feel when they contrast Washington, D.C. and Palm Springs is the transition from crowded urban housing to spacious desert living. In Washington, D.C., high housing costs and competitive rental markets keep many residents in spaces that feel tight and transactional. Even when homes are beautiful, everyday living can feel compromised by proximity, noise, and just sheer density. In Palm Springs and the surrounding Coachella Valley, many buyers are drawn to homes with scale, indoor and outdoor space, privacy landscaping that truly feels like living, and architectural designs that honor light and openness rather than just efficiency. This kind of housing experience isn't just aesthetic, it changes how you live. More space means room for remote work setups that feel comfortable, outdoor living areas where you can actually spend time, and an overall sense of pace that supports your life instead of exhausting it. And if you're thinking strategically about home ownership, there's another layer here that many relocation buyers overlook: the idea of buying long before you're ready to move full-time. That may sound counterintuitive, but it's a powerful approach, especially if you're between life seasons, still working part-time where you are, or thinking about retirement. You purchase now, rent it out initially, let mortgage coverage come from rental income, build equity, and then transition later when the timing aligns with your life and emotional readiness. It's a financial strategy as much as a lifestyle one, and it's one that more people are embracing as they think long-term. Of course, part of doing this strategy right is understanding the local short-term rental landscape up front, and Palm Springs has a thoughtful regulatory approach in place to protect neighborhoods and long-term housing. The city now requires a vacation rental registration certificate and permit for any short-term rental, and there's a limit on how many homes in a given neighborhood can be permitted, 20% of the total homes in that area. Because of this, we always review the neighborhood and the specific rental rules during our upfront conversation so you know exactly what's possible. That means choosing the right home in the right location, not just any home, so that the upside of the rental income, equity growth, and long-term lifestyle benefits all align with your goals. One of the first things relocation buyers ask is, will I feel at home here? That's a real question, especially if you're coming from a dense city with ready-made social networks. Palm Springs isn't built on chance connections. It's built on intentional community, and for many people, that community is woven into everyday life. Palm Springs has one of the most visible and connected LGBTQ+ communities in the country, and that visibility is not just an abstract statistic, it's a lived experience. In fact, nearly 50% of the population identifies as LGBTQ+, which is huge for such a relatively small town. Neighborhoods, social groups, events, and cultural scenes are welcoming and vibrant. You'll find local social calendars that read like invitations, art gatherings, design mixers, music events, drag brunches, desert hikes, community yoga, and pride celebrations throughout the year. When you compare that to Washington, D.C., where LGBTQ+ culture is broad and historic, but distributed across a sprawling metro, Palm Springs' compactness makes community feel accessible on a day-to-day level. People don't have to hunt for connection. It's part of the social landscape. That doesn't mean friendships happen automatically. It means opportunities for connection are everywhere once you step into the community rather than waiting for it to appear. As a gay man myself, I can honestly say that the quality of life is a game changer. Many people watching this aren't just thinking about a summer home or vacation property. They're thinking in terms of decades. They're thinking about retirement, lifestyle, sustainability, and how a relocation impacts their life 5 to 10 years down the road. That's where Palm Springs starts to feel less like a getaway and more like a destination living choice that's anchored in long-term strategy. Because the cost of housing here is considerably lower than Washington, both in terms of rent and often in sale price. Buyers with substantial budgets find they can afford deeper value in space, community, and lifestyle while preserving financial flexibility. And remember, Palm Springs isn't just an isolated desert city. It's part of the greater Coachella Valley, which means access to travel infrastructure, proximity to California culture in every direction, and nearby airports, including our own Palm Springs International Airport. Before we wrap up, let's address a few questions I hear often from people relocating from cities like Washington, D.C. Will I feel isolated or bored in Palm Springs once the novelty wears off? This is one of the most common and honest questions people ask. In my experience, isolation has far less to do with Palm Springs itself and far more to do with how someone chooses to engage once they're here. Palm Springs isn't a city that overwhelms you with constant stimulation. It invites you to participate. The people who thrive here are the ones who join a hiking group, attend gallery nights, show up to community events, say yes to invitations, and build rhythm into their social life. Because it's a smaller city, connections tend to be more personal and layered over time. If you wait for the city to entertain you, it can feel quiet. But if you step into the community, the LGBTQ+ scene, hiking groups, wellness groups, pickleball, and neighborhood gatherings, your social life often becomes richer and more intentional than it ever felt in a larger, more anonymous metro. And it usually happens quickly here. Is it too quiet or too slow for someone used to constant metropolitan life? Palm Springs has around 45,000 permanent residents, which is a dramatic scale shift from the 6+ million people in the greater DC metro. The restaurant scene here, while growing and generally enjoyable, doesn't yet match the depth and diversity of Washington DC's dining landscape. Nightlife is social and fun, but more intimate than nonstop. For people who draw energy from dense urban intensity and constant stimulation, Palm Springs can feel quieter, especially in the summers. But for those who are ready for a different relationship with their environment, less noise, more intention, more ease, the smaller scale is precisely the appeal. And when you do crave big city buzz, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Las Vegas are just a few hours away. How long before it feels like home? Most buyers tell me that the first year is really about rhythm, learning the neighborhoods, seasons, and cultural nuances. The second year is when it starts to feel like home. If what you love about Washington, D.C. is endless options, museums on every corner, intense urban buzz, and non-stop institutional life, then yes, the city might continue to suit you best. But if what you want most is clarity of pace, intentional connection, space, sunshine, and community that feels accessible in everyday living, then Palm Springs starts to look less like a pit stop and more like a real future. If Palm Springs is starting to feel like the future chapter, I'm always happy to talk things through. Most people who reached out to me directly aren't ready to move tomorrow. They just want clarity. I work with DC-based buyers and sellers like you every week, mapping smart timelines and options that actually fit real life. You can call or text me directly or use the contact links in the description. No pressure, just perspective. If you haven't yet already, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more exciting changes, developments, and opportunities taking place here in Palm Springs and the Coachella Valley. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.